Welcome to Deathwatch Astartes. In this video I will break down some of the abilities, uses, and synergies of different units within the Deathwatch Index. This video is for people who are figuring out Deathwatch, so if you're in the top 100 of ITC, I doubt I can help you. If this video is received well, I will make more outlining other Marine units and synergies within the Index Space Marines. Let's begin. For those totally new to the chapter, we are still members of the Adeptus Astartes, and so we also get the Oath of Moment army ability on top of our detachment ability. This lets us reroll all hits and wounds against the target we pick at the beginning of the command phase. Next we have the Deathwatch army specific rule, which is kill teams. It may seem like word salad, but there's two important takeaways. If you have a mixed unit and there are two toughness values on an even number of models, you use the higher of those toughness values. Also, when you're transporting a kill team, any of the models in the unit that would normally be Terminators, Outriders, Bikers, or have jump packs now do not have those keywords and can be mounted in transports as if they do not have those keywords. Importantly, those models still take up 2 spaces in each of those transports. Our detachment is the Black Spear Task Force. You use this instead of using the Gladius Task Force in Index Space Marines. Importantly, there are restrictions. You can't use any Adeptus Astartes from a different chapter, so you cannot include Deathwatch models with Space Wolves or Blood Angels. You also cannot include Assault Squads with or without jump packs, Attack Bikes, Devastator Squads, Land Speeder Storms, Scout Squad, Scout Snipers, or the Tactical Squad. Mission Tactics is very important. At the start of your command phase, you select which one of these you can use, and each one can only be used once. Furor Tactics gives you sustained hits 1 across your army. Malleus Tactics gives you lethal hits across your army. And Pregatus Tactics gives you precision if you roll a critical hit. The big takeaway here is that these work at all times on all weapons in between your command phases. So if you pick to have sustained hits for this whole command phase, that works through your turn, your opponent's turn, and then it ends at your next command phase. Moving on to our stratagems. Between mission tactics and our stratagems, these are the main reasons to use a Deathwatch army. Each of these are way more powerful than you may expect at first, especially when you consider you can use many of these on 2 separate units if they have the kill team keyword. First is Armor of Contempt. This lets you, for an entire phase, worsen the AP of enemies' weapons by 1. Teleportarium allows you to choose 2 kill team units or 1 other Adeptus Astartes infantry unit from your army. At the end of your opponent's fight phase, you remove them from the battlefield, and then in the reinforcement step of your next movement phase, you can set up those units anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches away from enemy models. But you cannot select them if they're already in engagement range. This is important for moving your units very rapidly across the field for different objectives. There's many uses for this that I'll get into as we're moving on to the individual units. Adaptive Tactics lets you choose 2 kill team units or 1 other Adeptus Astartes unit of any type from your army. And in your command phase, you use this. It lets you choose a mission tactic for that unit to be active until your next command phase. Hellfire rounds are our first special ammunition. In your shooting phase, which is very important, up to 2 kill team units from your army that have not been selected to shoot, or 1 Adeptus Astartes unit, excluding vehicles, gets to use this strat. It gives you anti-infantry 2+ and anti-monster 5+. Unfortunately, it's already been fact to remove the devastating wounds weapons from being able to use this. You also cannot use this with either of the other special issue ammunition strats. Kraken rounds is also 2 kill team units or 1 other Adeptus Astartes unit, excluding vehicles. This one, improve your armor penetration by 1 and add 6 inches to the range of your weapons. The important part of this one is it lets you add that extended range on top of that AP. And that extended range can let you get into rapid fire range with many weapons, which can surprise opponents with things like Eradicators coming in from Deep Strike. Dragonfire rounds have the same requirements for which units you can target in your army. It provides assault and ignores cover to your weapons. Assault can be very useful for units that don't have it to be able to advance and then come into a position to complete an action. Moving on to enhancements, we have 4. And I'm not going to get into particular synergies yet. I may talk about them when we are talking about the individual data sheets. But just to give an idea of what they do, Thief of Secrets adds 1 to strength damage and AP of melee weapons that a model's equipped with. It increases to an additional 1 strength damage and AP if you kill a character. The Osseous Key is Watchmaster Tech Marine only, and at the start of your opponent's shooting phase, you can pick a vehicle within 12 and visible, and it must take a leadership test. If it passes, it gets a -1 to hit. If it fails, it's not eligible to shoot that shooting phase. That one's very situational, and I don't know how much anyone will be using it. Beacon and Jealous gives the model's unit Deep Strike. It also lets you use Rapid Ingress for 0 CP. This can be very useful for objective claiming or getting a combat unit closer to the enemy. The timing of when Rapid Ingress lets you use it means that you can avoid things like a shooting phase that your opponents have, and then in your turn be able to move and charge something that's very important. The Tome of Vecticlades, or however that is said, lets you choose a second Oath of Moment target once per game. I'm going to talk about units before I begin talking about characters, because I feel in 10th edition, characters are more a modifier to a unit, rather than a Hero Hammer model on their own, at least in most cases. My initial reaction to Kill Team Cassius is I would avoid this. Looking at its odd mix of models that are within it, there's only 1 Terminator and 1 Biker, which means the unit is T4 until it's down to 4 models. The ability to have devastating wounds during melee is powerful, but I don't believe that there is enough combat power to really justify it when you can do much stronger things in basic units like Deathwatch veterans or your other kill teams. I was surprised when I realized that kill team is still a keyword on Deathwatch veterans. This allows some strong synergy with all of our stratagems. Also, Death to the Alien is a very powerful ability, which is you reroll 1s against anything. And then if it doesn't have Imperium or Chaos, you get to reroll the entire hit roll. This combined with the options the unit has available between heavy weapons and combat weapons can make them very versatile. And you can actually make a very competent combat unit out of them. With their OC2 can actually make them pretty annoying in the combat phase. You can also mix the unit to have heavy weapons and combat weapons to have the best of both worlds. And this may sound like a bad idea in modern 40k, but being able to take only your heavy weapons, which are your best weapons, and only Deathwatch Thunderhammers, and then just have some Storm Shield and Long Vigil melee weapons on the rest of your models, can actually make the unit very flexible, because then the only shots you have are your best shots. You can take hits on whichever models you need less of, and then by the time you're whittled down, you could just still have a very competent combat unit or still have a very competent shooting unit. This would be a great time to speak about the synergy with the Watchmaster. His ability to allow unit to shoot and charge, whether it advanced or fell back, can make something like Deathwatch veterans very mobile. They can then be claiming objectives because they have the ability to shoot, which allows them to do actions after advancing. Also, that means that if you have to fall back and do an action, that is still possible. The ability to advance and charge cannot be underrated. That makes a unit like Deathwatch veterans a lot more mobile than they may first seem with their short movement of only 6 inches. The other ability for a Watchmaster to do what was considered an Agents of Vect ability, to increase the cost of one of your opponent's stratagems by 1 for the rest of the game, is really strong. It can really interrupt the plans of your opponent, which is not something to overlook. His weapon is not particularly strong, but having D3 damage on a combat weapon can really surprise enemies from time to time. The only issue that this model really has is it can only be in Deathwatch veterans or a Proteus kill team. Watch Captain Artemis can also only join Deathwatch veterans or the Proteus kill team. But because of how powerful our stratagems are, his ability allows you to use an additional stratagem even if it's already been used. This can be very potent with using our special issue ammunition, have it going across like 4 units or more, depending on how much CP you have and if you also have a regular captain. I don't think his Unstoppable Champion is such a great ability. I'd rather have something else. But having a model come back after you killed it is nothing to overlook. His Hellfire Extremist is really good against infantry because anti-infantry makes it so critical hits happen on a 4+. And Devastating Wounds actually activates on the critical hit ability, or critical wound, I'm sorry. Between that and Torrent, it makes it so you're spitting out a lot of mortal wounds against enemy infantry. And he has a competent close combat weapon. I'd rather have a Power Fist than just a regular power weapon. But for what he is usable, especially at only 75 points. Next we have Deathwatch Terminators. I don't think this is really going to be a unit that many people use. It's nice to have the option because of just how many heavy weapons you can have in the squad. You can have 5 models with 3 of them having Cyclone missile launchers or assault cannons or flamers or plasma cannons, which really I don't see you using the flamers or plasma cannons on this. But being able to take 3 heavy weapons from 5 models does have its uses. Its Terminatus Assault is not a very good ability. Sure, having a Battle Shock test come out of nowhere can be useful, but considering what other Terminator squads have, there are better options. Teleport Homer is okay and lets you rapid ingress for 0 CP, but I'm not very impressed by this squad as a whole. I'm also not very impressed by the Veteran Bike Squad. It can be 3 or 6 models. They can all have the Long Vigil melee weapon, which makes them okay. They can advance automatically at 6 inches, which is pretty good for mobility, and they can still do objectives. They're OC2. There are options to use this, but it's not exactly something I would jump at. I think there are better options for mobility with our ability to use the teleportarium. I think infiltrators are very important, and we can get to all those either later in the video, or in the case of infiltrators, I might talk about them in a future video. The Corvus Blackstar feels very usable now. Between its ability to transport just a kill team of any number of models, which means it can also include characters with that, or 12 Adeptus Astartes infantry, and that's pretty good. It also has a good selection of anti-tank weapons, which some people feel we lack as Deathwatch. There are many options, and with the ability to use Oath of Moment, we actually have a lot of options. It's war gear. I don't think the Infernum Halo launcher is all that useful because it already comes with stealth. The Auspex array could be useful because removing cover from a target can actually be very beneficial. And also it can spit out some random mortal wounds with its Black Star Cluster launcher. I don't think that's a main purpose of it. Twin-linked assault cannon, or the twin assault cannon, is actually kind of a standout because of devastating wounds and twin link. The two of those together can mean you're actually spitting out a pretty reliable amount of mortal wounds. Statistically, 2 if you hit with everything. The Proteus kill team is probably our premier kill team. Its ability to add 1 to the hit roll against any target that's not below half strength is extremely strong. That means the majority of the targets you actually want to be shooting at or hitting in combat, it adds a very tremendous benefit. The main way to run this unit is with 4 Terminators, a Biker, and then 5 just regular veterans. That makes that unit T5, and as you remove models, you can remove one of your Firstborn Marines and then one of your Bikers, and then go Marine, Terminator. This will keep that unit at T5 for the entirety of the time it's on the table. That can be very strong. Also, the unit has some great options for weapons. Notably, it says for every 5 models in the unit, you can take 2 of certain options. That doesn't mean 5 Deathwatch veterans and then you can take those options. That is every 5 models in the unit. So if you're taking the 10-man unit, which you should if you're doing this, you can have up to 4 Deathwatch Thunderhammers, up to 4 of your frag cannons or Infernus bolters, and then also still have 3 Cyclone missile launchers or 3 assault cannons. Also, you have the option on those Terminators to take Chain Fists or swap them out for Lightning Claws, which I don't think you'll ever do, or have one Terminator that's Thunderhammer Storm Shield, which can add a pretty good amount of durability onto one model to just soak some damage before you start taking damage on more important models. At that point, you should be 4 Terminators and 4 Deathwatch veterans, and then you can start removing the Terminators slowly because you have one that is more ablative wounds than the rest of them. The Proteus kill team has a lot of options for what characters to take with it. First, there's the Watchmaster. Having those Terminators combined with that many Deathwatch Thunderhammers can make a unit that has a good amount of firepower with all of those missile launchers and is really good in combat. Or you can also take the assault cannons. That's, I think, more of a flavor choice at this point. Taking your special issue ammunition with the missile launchers, though, can make your frag missiles anti-infantry 2+, which can just pour out damage onto hordes. And then having that Watchmaster be able to let you advance and charge, you have the combat ability. He's okay. Mixed it all together. It's a really good combat unit and can hold central objectives pretty well, do a good amount of damage, and be reasonably tough. You can also take Chaplain for the +1 to wound. That's actually really good when you're looking at stuff like Deathwatch Thunderhammers into some of the heavier vehicles in the game, or even just Power Fists if you're only taking those on your Terminator so you still hit on 3+ or 2+ if the target is below or above half strength. I prefer to always have one of my Proteus teams have a regular captain with them. The ability to make one of your stratagems 0 CP, can't even say how strong that is. Then adding in the fact that you can throw the Thief of Secrets onto a captain with a Power Fist. And now that Power Fist is Strength 9, AP 3, 3 damage. He can also use the Finest Hour ability to then add 3 additional attacks and devastating wounds onto that weapon. Combining that with the Pregoddess mission tactic, you can reliably remove a character out of a unit and then have the Thief of Secrets make that Power Fist now Strength 10, AP 4, flat 4 damage. I also like taking a lieutenant alongside that captain. That makes it so you have the fallback and shoot and charge ability, which makes the unit very flexible for doing stuff like objectives. If you have an objective, say you're using tactical objectives, and there's an objective marker nearby that you need to fall back to jump onto, you can easily do that, and then either still be able to shoot, or if you have an action you need to accomplish, they're able to do that after falling back. Also, lethal hits is really good with the amount of attacks that you can have in both shooting or in combat between storm bolters, frag missiles, crack missiles. If you're taking the Infernus bolters, using the bolter side of that can be a lot of damage that's getting pushed through just in out of one unit. Our worst option is easily the Fortis kill team. Between its odd selection of models that you can take and the fact that its Fortis doctrine works on a target that's below half strength, it's just bad. You want to be able to hit hard while a unit is fresh. And then if there's only a couple models left, having extra to hit or wound against it is never all that great. You can only have 2 outriders with the unit, which with the Proteus team, the great benefit was being able to take that extra toughness. You can only have 4 of the Hellblaster-like models. They don't call them Hellblasters in this unit because they just have plasma and incinerators. And that makes this unit kind of weak. You don't get all the options you do with the Deathwatch veterans. Your basic intercessors only have the bolt rifles, which they're okay, but between having all the options for the Proteus team and having all the options just even in Deathwatch veterans, which these are not even battle line, the veterans you can have more of, they do more options. This unit needs to be looked at again because it's just bad. The Indomitor kill team, on the other hand, is actually really good. With the way you can choose models in this unit, you actually end up with a good amount of firepower. Your heavy intercessors are obviously only going to either have the bolt rifle or the heavy bolter, but because it's worded the way where you can take 1 heavy bolter for every 5 models in the unit, that means your unit of 10 models can have 2 heavy bolters out of those 5 heavy intercessors you're required to take. Then you can also take 2 aggressors. They're called heavy intercessors with power fists here. You can have 2 eradicator-like models and 2 interceptor style models. The way I believe you want to run this is with 2 of your aggressors, have them either flame storm or the bolt storm. I think that's mostly up to choice. I prefer the flame storm for the auto hitting. Then you take only 1 of the eradicator style models because you can then give him just a multi-melta. And then your inceptors, you can have 2 of the inceptors with plasma incinerators, or I believe they're called like plasma exterminators. Sorry. And between that's a lot of high AP firepower that's really good against like heavy infantry. You have heavy bolters, so you have a lot of shots coming out between all the different weapons. Majority of it's at 18 inches, or it rapid fires at 18 inches. Those are all... Oh, I'm sorry. The heavy bolt rifle only rapid fires at 15. But between all of that, you have a good amount of firepower, and the Indomitor doctrine is actually really good because if you're below starting strength, you get +1 to hit. This is a tough unit. It's not going to just get blown off the field after taking those ablative wounds on your heavy intercessors with the heavy bolt rifles, you start hitting on +1. And then if you're below half strength, you wound at +1 as well. And this is shooting in combat. So those power fists on the aggressors actually end up being quite strong against just about everything out there. And then your plasma exterminators, your multi-melta, whichever gauntlet you take, all those end up being really strong as well. So this unit is a lot more flexible than it may look like at first. And then you can also add a Gravis Captain, who then provides the benefit of regular Captain free CP, but also he halves all damage that comes in on him. So he's not easy to remove. Somebody who's trying to come in and throw some precision attacks at him, they're not just going to remove him from the unit immediately. Also, he can take the Thief of Secrets, which makes him hit on that Strength 9 AP3 3 damage, but he gets the extra attack from the Relic Fist on top of the Power Fist attacks. So he doesn't get Finest Hour, but he gets more attacks through the rest of the game. It makes him a pretty strong choice. You don't have a choice for a Lieutenant in Gravis Armor, but you do have a choice for the Apothecary Biologus. He gives the lethal hits, which is great. With that many shots coming out of the unit, you're going to have a good amount of wound conversion just from the lethal hits. And then also, if this unit kills something in combat, which isn't great in combat, but you do have a set of power fists, and then the Gravis Captain, if you're also taking him, counts as part of the unit. So then between all of that, you would actually have some pretty competent combat ability to then have the Biologus boost up to the OC9 that he gets if you kill something in combat. The last option out of the Deathwatch Index specifically is the Spectrus kill team. And the Spectrus doctrine seems okay at first. The unit seems a little underwhelming when I first looked at it. But the Spectrus doctrine, at the end of your opponent's turn, if they are 6 inches away from enemy units, you can just remove them from the battlefield and put them in strategic reserves. And then in your next reinforcement step, you can bring them back on. The unit can have a Helix Gauntlet. It can take 2 of Eliminator style models with the sniper rifles. You don't get the option for the las fusils here. You can have 2 suppressor like models. Those are the infiltrators with jump packs. You can have 4 incursor style models, which I don't think you'll take, and then 4 of your Reaver style models, which Reavers are bad on their own. They're not any better here. So between all of this, it doesn't seem all that great on paper. But if you only take 5, they're 110 points. You then give them the option of taking the Librarian and Phobos armor, which then blocks out any shots coming at them from outside 12 inches and gives them the stealth keyword as well. Then on that model, I would take the Beacon and Jealous. That makes it so when you come back in that reinforcement step, you now have the Deep Strike ability. It also gives you access to rapid ingress for 0 CP, which I'm not really caring about because it's mostly about being able to redeploy this unit constantly and quickly. This unit then becomes a very good objective holder and objective claimer because all game it can just be jumping and landing and jumping and landing and jumping and landing. So any objectives that need to happen in your shooting phase, this unit doesn't have great shooting, so you don't really care if it shoots or not. And then nobody can target it outside of 12 inches. So if you're pretty good at where you place this unit, it's not getting shot, it's not getting interacted with, and you can do pretty much whatever you want with it. For right now, I believe that covers everything I'm going to go over today. I hope I gave some good options and ideas to newer players. If you like this content, please like this video, subscribe. This is a new channel, I'm trying this out, and if people subscribe, show some interest, I will probably move on to showing synergies and ideas between more of the regular Marine Codex Index, and the rest of the options that are really strong for Deathwatch. There's a lot of options that are in that index just because of the amount of individual data cards that it has. So there's a lot to cover here. It'd probably be over a few videos. And then, depending on how this goes, I might make further content. I might approach this in different ways. But I'm here to see how it goes.